Good morning, everybody. Today we are finishing up the interwar years unit, and then we will be proceeding to our World War II unit. But we will be taking the test on Thursday. And so that will be what you have to do on Thursday during class. The test will be available when you log into Canvas on Thursday morning, and then you just use Thursday's class period to get the test done. Remember, if you want points on the test, you have to take it on test day. You can't be late on the tests. They have to be done on time. So, please make sure that you sign in on Thursday morning to class and get the test done. But today we still have to finish up the unit. So, where we left off last class, we talked about one of the first things that Germany does to break the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles, remember, on top of blaming Germany for World War I and destroying their economy by making them pay for it, there were a number of other restrictions that had been placed on Germany. So one of those restrictions was that this region right here along the Rhine River, okay, this is the Rhine River right here, all right? The German military was not allowed to go west of the Rhine River into these regions right here, known as the Rhineland. Okay, this is the Rhineland over here. As you can see, it's situated between France and Germany, Belgium and Germany, and Netherlands and Germany. It's this western region right here. So when these troops that I showed you last class were marching into that area. Here they're marching across the Rhine River on the bridge. Here they are entering into town on the other side. This was a deliberate breaking of the rules of the Treaty of Versailles. And so they enter into this region that they weren't supposed to enter into going back to 1919. It's now 1936. So it's been 17 years, and the German military for the first time enters into this region. But France, Belgium, Dutch Republic, or Netherlands rather, and Britain choose to do nothing about that, because remember, these are still technically German lands. Okay, the German military hasn't invaded anywhere. They just were not allowed to bring their own military into these lands over here that were part of Germany. And they do that. And so Britain, France, they basically say, well, you know, we're not going to start a war for Germany entering troops into their own regions. Okay? Let's take a look more closely, though, at this map, because there's going to be four different ways that the Germans break rules that they weren't supposed to break. And basically, it starts with the Rhineland in 1936. 2 years later, in March of 1938, there is an incident known as the Anschluss. Anschluss, okay? And the Anschluss is spelled like this. Anschluss, okay? The Anschluss was the annexing of Austria. So the next thing that happens is in March of 1938, Germany completely annexes Austria, the country of Austria. And Austria is where Hitler was from originally. And here you can see Munich in the south part of Germany, okay, southern Germany. This is where Hitler staged his unsuccessful coup back in 1923. Hitler was from Austria. And so the Germans annexed Austria Austria really didn't resist too much because Austria, they're culturally German, right? And Germany was growing and becoming more powerful, and so Austria gets absorbed by Germany. They kind of go willfully though, and so once again, Britain, France, even though Germany is breaking rules by annexing Austria, there had been many conversations going back a century before Germany became a unified state as to whether or not Austria would be part of Germany or not. And in a pre-World War I time, Austria had no interest in becoming part of Germany because they had their own empire. But now that it's 1938 and the Austrian Empire has been dissolved, and Austria is kind of, this small little country now that is a shadow of its former imperial self, it's looking to become part of something bigger. And so many folks in Austria welcome being absorbed by Germany because it will mean good things for the Austrian economy. And so Austria gets absorbed. Once again, Britain and France do nothing. They stand there, they watch it happen. They don't want to go to war over Germany annexing Austria when Austria pretty much willfully was annexed. So that's the next time that Germany breaks the rules. The third time Germany breaks the rules is with something known as the Sudetenland, and that's right here, Sudetenland, September 1938. September 1938, this is Czechoslovakia. This is the boundary, this is the border of the nation state of Czechoslovakia in 1936. Okay? In 1938, Hitler, with his goal of bringing all German-speaking peoples under a single German nation state, says, well, most people who live in these regions on the outskirts of the border of Czechoslovakia are German-speaking peoples, Sudeten Germans as they're called, Sudeten Germans. And so this area known as the Sudetenland gets annexed by Germany, just the border region at first, okay, just the border region at first. And famously, at this point, this is when Britain starts to get concerned. Well, they may have already been concerned, but this is when we notice that Britain actually takes steps to try to prevent further hostility. The Sudeten Germans were okay with being annexed, but Czechoslovakia certainly was not okay with it. And so Czechoslovakia, which is the last remaining bastion of democracy in Central Europe, is concerned when Hitler decides to annex the border regions of Czechoslovakia. Britain steps in and says, hey, you can't just be taking lands from Czechoslovakia, and so let's have a meeting. And this meeting takes place, I'm going to jump forward a little bit here since we're talking about it right now. This meeting takes place called the Munich Conference. It's September of 1938. And the Prime Minister of Britain at this time is a guy named Neville Chamberlain. And he wants to preserve peace basically by giving in to German demands. And so the Sudetenland is full of German people. Hitler says, I want to take over the Sudetenland. Neville Chamberlain, Prime Minister of Britain, goes down to Munich and meets with Hitler. And here you can see the meeting that took place. Here's Neville Chamberlain meeting Hitler. Basically, he has no idea who he's dealing with here. Neville Chamberlain comes down, meets with Hitler. Hitler basically says to Neville Chamberlain, look, the people who live in the Sudetenland are German. I am the, leader of Germany. All people who are German should live in the boundaries of Germany. And Neville Chamberlain says that's fine, but it stops here. Okay? After the Sudetenland, you can't go and take more land. You can't go and take over the rest of Czechoslovakia. You certainly can't take over Poland. Hitler says, I have no interest in that. I only want German-speaking people living in Germany. And so Neville Chamberlain has this nice conversation with Hitler, and he famously returns back to England with a document that he had Hitler sign saying that Hitler will stop taking over lands now that he's gotten the Sudetenland, and that will be the end of it. And Chamberlain infamously says in this press conference as he steps off the plane when he returns back to England, I believe I have preserved peace for our time. Okay, I believe I have preserved peace for our time. And these are famous last words because Hitler had no intention of stopping there. Okay, Hitler has every intention of continuing to be aggressive. He basically told Neville Chamberlain what he wanted to hear. Neville Chamberlain goes home feeling like he's had this nice meeting with Hitler and everything is going to be peaceful now that he has once again given in to Hitler's demands to take over the Sudetenland. Well, within just a couple of months after taking over the Sudetenland and the Munich Conference, Hitler moves right into the rest of the western portion of Czechoslovakia and takes it all over. And once again, at this point, Britain and France do nothing. They look at Czechoslovakia as Eastern Europe. They look at it as backwards and underdeveloped. And they don't care that it's the last democracy that could have, helped them out in a war. And so Czechoslovakia, before World War II even starts, Czechoslovakia has already largely been taken over by Germany. So now the Germans control these areas here, which they already technically had, but now their military is there, which is concerning, of course, because it's the same area that the Germans used to enter into France back in World War I. That was the reason that they weren't allowed to enter with their military into these regions, is because it's right next to where the Germans invaded in World War I. But now they're there. They've also taken over Austria. That was step 2. Step 3 was taking over the Sudetenland, and then, shortly thereafter, the rest of Czechoslovakia. All right? They also, I don't know if you remember this from the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, when the Treaty of Versailles was signed, one of the things that absolutely aggravated Hitler to no end was the fact that Germany got cut in two. So there was this area of Germany over here called East Prussia, okay? Those were German lands. And then you had the rest of Greater Germany over here to the west. But there was this swath of land that was cut out right here where Poland is, so that Poland wouldn't be landlocked and that they would have access to the seaport of Danzig, is the name of it, Danzig, okay? And this was a monstrosity to Hitler and the Nazis. This really bothered them, that German lands were cut into to create a port for this brand new nation state of Poland. And so Hitler for a long time was really, really resentful about this, what they call the Polish corridor, okay, the Polish corridor, where they lost land so that Poland would have access to the sea, all right? Hitler also took over this area right here, okay, in Lithuania. Once again, no one put up a fuss about that. But the fourth major move that Hitler makes, and the thing that ends up initiating World War II, is when Hitler invaded Poland. He doesn't do it, though, without some planning. So what does he do? First of all, let me cover this real quick before I forget to. There was a civil war in Spain that goes on starting in the 1930s, and that was because the government in Spain was pretty weak. And Hitler and Mussolini wanted Spain to become fascist so that there would be another European state that moved to fascism and would be allies with Germany in World War II. But the Western nations remain neutral in the Spanish Civil War. They don't want to get involved. Spain has fallen a long way from its days of glory. It's kind of this underdeveloped state down in southwestern Europe. And ultimately, in the end of that civil war, Spain does become fascist with a new leader by the name of Francisco Franco, otherwise known as Generalissimo Franco. And he is the Spanish dictator of Spain, but he's kind of, you know, how I told you how Mussolini never had the level of totalitarian control that either Hitler or Stalin had. Generalissimo Franco has even less control over Spain than Mussolini has over Italy. Franco is kind of a, you know, not a particularly strong leader. He's a fascist leader, but he doesn't have the same level of influence or control that, say, Hitler had or even Mussolini had over Italy. And so Generalissimo Franco becomes the Spanish fascist dictator, but Spain pretty much stays out of World War II. Spain is really not in a condition or in a position to be able to effectively contribute to World War II, and so they pretty much sit it out. Spain really does not become very involved in the war at all, and so that's kind of the story on Spain. All right. So the United States, where's the U.S. in all of this? The United States, the last thing that America wants to do is get involved in another European war. All right, and so going back to the end of World War I, after America lent their assistance at the very tail end of the war, basically America had been practicing a foreign policy known as isolationism. What does this mean? Basically, America is trying to isolate themselves on their side of the ocean. They don't want to get overly involved in all of these confusing European affairs. They certainly don't want to get involved in another event like World War I. And so the United States has more or less just been kind of chilling on their side, focusing on themselves, mostly because the Great Depression had really hit America hard. And so America they've got their own fish to fry. You know, they're dealing with their own problems of getting through the Great Depression and other things like that. They have no interest in dealing with whatever's going on in Europe. The Weimar Republic by this point is gone. Okay, Germany no longer has the Weimar Republic. Hitler forms what's called the Third Reich. The Third Reich. And that phrase, the Third Reich, comes from basically history. Germany, according to Hitler, Germany had had two Reichs. The First Reich was the Holy Roman Empire days, going back to the 14, 15, 16, and 1700s. That was the First Reich of German existence, according to Hitler. The Second Reich was the formation of the German Empire under Otto von Bismarck, when Germany became a unified state. Remember that for a long time, Germany was a group of divided states and was not unified. Germany didn't become a unified nation state under the leadership of the German emperor until 1871, almost a full century after America gains its independence from the British back in the Revolutionary War. So Germany had reached the Second Reich when it became an empire, thanks to Otto von Bismarck, who was the chancellor for the German Kaiser, the Emperor of Germany. And then that fell at the end of World War I, and Hitler now was forming what he called the Third Reich, the third rise of Germany to prominence, okay? And he thought that the Third Reich would last for 1,000 years. That was his intention. And so the Third Reich is a phrase that we use to describe the period of time when Hitler and the Nazis were in power in Germany, all right? And of course, it does not last 1,000 years. It lasts about, well, 12 years roughly, and then the Third Reich is destroyed at the end of World War II. So like I said, he absorbed Austria and Czechoslovakia to create this new German empire, the Third Reich. And when he absorbed Austria, that was known as the Anschluss. And those areas of Czechoslovakia that he first took over was the Sudetenland, and then he eventually takes over the majority of Czechoslovakia. And in 1938, France and Britain basically ignore their pledge to protect Austrian independence. So when Hitler takes over Austria, France and Britain do nothing. When Hitler meets with Neville Chamberlain at the Munich Conference, all right, he basically lies to Neville Chamberlain, tells him what he wants to hear, gets him to believe that Germany is not going to be aggressive anymore now that they've taken over the Sudetenland, and that's not true. Hitler lies, and he continues his path of aggression. And but the final straw, the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say, was when Hitler decided to invade Poland. And so Chamberlain, as I said, came back. I believe it is peace for our time, famous last words, because shortly thereafter, World War II would begin. So just 1 year later, after Chamberlain met with Hitler in September of 1938, in September of 1939, Hitler invades Poland. But, as I said, before he invades Poland, he comes up with a plan. He does not want the Soviet Union to attack Germany, all right? Hitler does not want to enter into a war with the Soviet Union over Poland. And so what Hitler does is he sets up a meeting with Nazi political figures and Joseph Stalin, the Soviet leader. And here you can see an image of that. And this guy right there who's signing that document is a guy named Joachim von Ribbentrop. Joachim von Ribbentrop. And Joachim von Ribbentrop was the Nazi foreign minister serving Hitler. And he goes to meet with Stalin, who's standing on the right there, and that's Molotov on the left, who was one of Stalin's right-hand men. And the Nazis and the Soviets sign a pact with one another. This was really confusing to people because the Nazis hated the Soviets. The Nazis hated communism. So why would fascist Germany meet with Stalin and sign a pact? Well, in the newspapers, it sounds like Hitler is trying to make peace. People read the article in the newspapers, oh my gosh, Hitler has just signed a treaty, a pact with the Soviet Union, and it seems like he's trying to commit Germany to this idea of peace. But behind closed doors, as they met, the real conversation that took place was, let's sign a pact with one another not to be aggressive, not to fight one another, and instead what we will both do is invade Poland from both sides. We will split Poland in half. We'll take either side of Poland for our own countries, and then we will call it a day. And we won't go to war, we won't fight. They negotiate the boundaries and all of that stuff behind closed doors. Nobody knows that that's what the secret plan is. But the secret plan and the reason why the Nazis and the Soviets, who hate one another, signed this agreement is because they mutually are actually agreeing to both invade Poland. Germany from the west. Here, let me show you the map. Germany will invade from the west. The Soviet Union will invade from the east, and they will split the lands of Poland up, divide them between the two of them, and each of them will take over their portion. And so this is the plan. And the plan goes into effect on September 1st, 1939, when Hitler invades Poland. And this, finally, after the Rhineland, after the Anschluss, after the Sudetenland, after the invasion of the rest of Czechoslovakia, finally, the fourth time that Hitler breaks the rules by invading Poland, finally the British and the French step in and say, we have to do something. And both of them, even though they are very, very reluctant to declare war on Germany, both of them declare war on Germany because Hitler is in defiance of the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, because he was strictly forbidden from invading Poland. And there's no excuse that can be made this time about him taking over lands that German people live in. This is going beyond that. This goes into taking over lands that are just pure and simple. They don't have German people, and there was no reason that Hitler should have taken them over. And Britain and France declare war on Germany. But when they do that, neither Britain nor France are prepared for war. And so when they declare war on Germany, they basically just they do it, and then they don't really do anything. They certainly don't want to invade Germany. They kind of sit for a while, and they decide not to invade and kind of see what happens. Rather, they want to prepare themselves and make sure that they are ready to fight a war. They have to mobilize their troops. They have to get themselves into position. Britain has to move their troops over to France across the English Channel. It's going to take them a little bit of time to get ready. But that is the thing that ultimately led Britain and France to declare war on Germany, beginning World War II in Europe. If we include Asia in World War II, technically it already started when Japan invaded China back in 1936-37. All right, so technically we could say that World War II has already started, just not in Europe. It had already started because Japan had invaded China and was making their way down to the eastern seaboard of the Chinese territory. But in Europe, World War II doesn't start until Germany invades Poland and Britain and France both declare war on Germany. And Germany, of course, is like, what? Why are you declaring war on us? You know, we're a peaceful nation. We just signed this pact with the Soviet Union. Da, 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 da. And Britain and France say the ruse is up. We're going to war. And Germany says, well, you declared war on us, so I guess we're going to have to declare war on you back. And that is the beginning of World War II, which is our next unit. So at this time, that is the end of the PowerPoint for the interwar years. I wanted to make mention to you, you are going to have two different assignments today. The lecture is a little shorter than usual. All right, we've only been in class for about a half hour, but I am going to give you the remainder of today's class to get started on these assignments. You will probably finish at least one, maybe even both of them by the end of class because you have about 50 minutes to get it done. But before I sign out here, I wanted to make sure that if you had any questions going all the way back to the first thing that we talked about in this unit between the Chinese Nationalist Party and the Chinese Communist Party, and Imperial China collapsing and all of that stuff, all the way up through Einstein and the cultural changes that we talked about, Sigmund Freud, existentialism, the lost generation of writers, the Great Depression, the Weimar Republic, any of those things that we've talked about throughout this entire unit. We've been in this unit for about 3 weeks now. We've covered a lot of content. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask those questions so that we can do some review or that I can clear things up for you or what have you. So if you have questions, please go ahead and type them in the thing. Kevin asked how many questions are on the test. I don't know exactly how many questions are on the test, Kevin. I think it's probably in the area of 50 to 60, maybe, somewhere in that area. Any questions, clarification, things I can clear up? Am I going to upload the PowerPoint? Did I not upload the PowerPoint? I thought I did. Files, lecture PowerPoints, Years of Crisis. Yeah, it's up there already. It's right here. And the Imperial China one is there as well. Okie dokie. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, I will go and upload these assignments so that you guys can start working them. Yep, the test is on Thursday. That is right, Michael. Alrighty guys, well, if you feel good about everything and you're looking back and you don't have any questions, then I will call an end to the lecture for today. Stay tuned on Canvas, be refreshing it in about 5 minutes here because I will upload the assignments for you. There will be 2 assignments. Please make sure you get them both done by the time that you start the test on Thursday morning. And other than that, just sign in Thursday to Canvas. You'll see a link for the test there. You just take the test during class time, and that will be your class for Thursday. And then we will meet back on Friday morning to finish out the week. But other than that, that's all I have for today. So study up, make sure you're ready for the test. Go over some vocab terms, go over the old slides of the PowerPoint, do what you need to do. It's the same difficulty as any test. It's no harder than any of the other tests that you've taken in here, so it should be doable for you. Okay, guys, that's it for me. Have a great day.